G'day everyone, welcome to today's vlog. So this is going to be part 2 of a 3-part look at the Fragged Kingdom Great Houses. I know last video was a little bit rushed because I kind of wanted to set up what are the Great Houses and then get through as many as I can. I'm hoping to get through 7 today. And what I thought might be fun is to, after every time I talk through one of the Great Houses and sort of show you their history, where they were before the Great War, and where they are now in Paul's Rest, is maybe to propose a bit of a fun example character, which could be a PC or an NPC, to come from this great house, or someone connected to the great house. So even the goal of these great houses is to sort of establish the culture and the political and the economic framework of those that live within Paul's Rest. So even though you may not be a member of one of these houses, you may have been under one of these houses. And this sort of shows you in the feudal society where the lords and ladies really do dominate. They are the justice system. They are they shape the culture of the area. Comes out from them. It's the economic system dwells in. Are they a good ruler or are they a bad ruler? What are their ambitions? What do they prioritize? Where are they putting their money and their effort? What is their personalities like? Are they flippant and fun, or are they harsh and authoritarian? Are they good ally makers, or do they make lots of enemies? So that's the goal of this, is sort of to help sort of provide logs for the creative logs to the fire of your own creativity. It's kind of a bit of a guiding mantra for me as a game designer. Okay, so let's jump into these houses. So we're going to be starting off with a bit of a big and important house today, which is Catla. Okay, so Catla. So this is the pre-Druidic War map here. Catla is here. This is a Tolatal Great House. And these are the guys who formed the King's Alliance, the empire that spanned this continent. Okay? So they allied with these other houses here, and then sort of took over the north and then the east over here in the Isles. This is the Great House. This is the ruling Great House. And now that the empire is smashed, kind of holding on to the threads of power, wondering how can they get back? How much of that old power can they hold on to and maintain and milk into the future? Are they going to fall, or are they going to stay on top? Okay, so I will read through these guys and then we'll have a little chat. Okay, so Katla. Family head is Duke Katla, Tolatal. Long live the king? Well, the king is dead, the throne is empty, and House Katla rests atop its ashes. Yet we are like the phoenix, and will rise again to take our rightful place. For too long they have denied House Katla her throne. They shall give us our birthright willingly, or it will be forced from them. Duke Katla. Katla was the ruling house of the realm and had governed the King's Alliance since its very inception. It was thought an obscure custom, but to prevent political infighting within the house, minor family members who were far removed from the crown would take a vow to remove all claims to any divine right to the throne. This vow of allegiance protected these House Katla family members from the political schemes of others, and allowed the monarch to appoint them to prominent court positions without placing the crown in danger. But the vow of allegiance had an unfortunate side effect after the war. As there was none left alive within House Katla that could claim divine right, as those few members that made it to Stronghold had given up their right to rule. And so, for the first time ever, the King's Alliance found itself without a king. House Katla strongly contested the maintained validity of this vow. but the newly appointed Regency Council had reinforced its power, as it was a divine vow made to the gods and all people of the Alliance. House Catla retained its powerful political and social statuses, however, and they were still backed by the great wealth they had accrued over the centuries. This great wealth has earned them the highest positions of power within Stronghold society, along with the trappings and alliances that come with coin. But without the throne and the taxes that once kept them flush, their coffers grow increasingly empty. They still spend large amounts and throw lavish parties to maintain the facade of prosperity, but the house leaders can see the end coming. The intelligent and bold Duke Uman is working hard to bleed the council and his rivals of their power, so that House Katla may become the true power of this new world. But if this is to be done before the vaults run dry of gold, they must move quickly. To achieve this goal, House Katla has been moving key allies into powerful positions, both within Stronghold and among the vanguard who are reclaiming the wilds. But funding dangerous expeditions put in untamed lands is difficult work, where money does not guarantee success. Okay, so that's these guys. That's House Catla. If we have a look at a Pole's Rest, you can see very prominently they are the leading house in Stronghold, which is the only big city in the whole area. Like it's the biggest city. Okay, and they've got a little bit outside of that, but mostly you're looking at Stronghold. Okay, so imagine this is like their vaults were full of coin, and they've been spending all this money to keep up the facade of power, keeping their alliances and their old sort of way of living going. So they look more powerful now, but they're on the clock. So what a fun character for House Catla. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, is of course comes to mind of like the foolish young lord or lady or knight from the family who believes in the family lie. They believe that their coffers are full, that they are in charge, and they're going to retake the throne once again once they figure out how to get around that tricky vow of allegiance problem. But they believe it. So they're pompous and they're so full of themselves and so confident. But then you can imagine partway through the story, maybe the higher ups are starting to wanting to save money, and they're like, this troublesome lord or lady is spending a bit too much, so we're going to give them a job. They have to do something, or we're gonna cut their allowance. And you can sort of see that as the first signs of a crack, okay, in their facade and their lifestyle. So maybe they've been given the job to go out and found some new lands along with the PCs who are acting as the vanguard, and they have to put up with this person. You know, that could be a fun character. Okay, let's have a look at another house. So this is House Cato. Okay, so House Cato is right there in the middle. That's where they were, right in the middle of this continent. Okay, and you can see that they are portions of two different houses, or that's where their ancient roots were. Okay, so let's read through House Cato, and they have a very kind of a French naming structure a little bit. Okay, Signor Johann Cato, Kaltoran. Cato, the baby kingdom of the Alliance. What they would have become without the Druidic War is unknown, but what they will become in this new world is almost a guarantee. Though small in number, the Kaltoran Cato family is ideally gifted for all the major hurdles of this new world: politics, war, kingdom building, exploration of eternal ruins, alchemy, and fighting off druids. It's almost as if the gods sculpted them for this very moment in history. Monsieur David Veldis, friend of Signor Johann, Cato. The vassal lords of Cato had long suffered under the negligent rule of House Veldis before they rose up against their masters. The civil war was long and difficult, as the people of Cato entrenched themselves into the hills of their swampy homeland, while Veldis struggled under the leadership of an inept and decadent noble class. Through the influence of political ambassadors, House Katla eventually forced the prideful House Veldis to come to peace with their wayward neighbour. After much negotiation, terms were met, resulting in Cato independence, and a marriage between the crowned prince of Cato and a Veldis princess. The years that followed were prosperous for House Cato, as they spread their ambassadors out across the continent and invited all to invest in their new kingdom. The joining of House Cato and House Veldis also bore unexpected fruit, as the royal offspring gained ancestral memories of many Veldis secrets. House Cato was not above using these secrets as political leverage against Veldis and forced them into many unfavourable arrangements. Not long before the Druidic War, hired boon engineers discovered a large dray structure under the kingdom's large central lake. The ensuing fight against the Guardians of Dray was difficult, but Cato emerged victorious and gained possession of many powerful alchemical sparks. These sparks proved invaluable during the war, as they allowed the well-fortified nation to maintain control over central Katla for several years. In recognition of their service, Signor Johann Cato was given a minor position of power within Stronghold. Signor Johann is an ambitious man, whose mind is filled with the fresh combat and kingdom-building memories of his parents and grandparents, giving him ideal skills for this new world. Johann bears no ill will towards his Veldis family, as his Veldis mother was a key figure of inspiration in his life. Cool. Okay. So these guys here. So I'm just going to flip over. So this is the house here. This is Veldis. So Veldis was having a very corrupt and decadent noble class, and a bunch of their nobles rebelled. And they eventually, they fortified this swampy, hilly area here. And eventually they were forced to peace by this kingdom here. And you got these guys. So they've only been around for a few generations before the war. Their survival depended on political intrigue and kingdom building. Okay? And also, it had a unique little thing came from Kaltorans, because Kaltorans have genetic memories. Okay? So, because the princess from this house over here married into them, their children were born with a bunch of ancestral memories, and they kind of knew some dirty stuff on these guys, on their larger neighbor, and they used that as pressure. Okay, and so I immediately think of for this house, so Cato. Oh wait, we better have a quick look at where they sit in Pole's Rest. Okay. If I could type this in. Okay, so they're just here. They've got a minor position in Stronghold, despite being a tiny great house. Their political connections sort of wiggle their way in there. Yeah. Okay. So let's when I think of Cato, the things that come to mind, okay, is ambition. Okay? They are the great house that is punching way above their weight range. Okay? By all means, they shouldn't even be in the ring. Okay? They should be delegated, like House Bard, off to the sidelines. They're a minor great house. They're not a big player, but they're kind of their continuing successes are sort of feeding into this confidence that maybe they can do something. Okay, so I could definitely see a PC being from House Cato, or someone who wants to go out there and found their own town, or playing politics to sort of gather the resources to endeavor on one of those. So you might be in Stronghold, might be hired by someone from House Cato, but they kind of, borrowed money from a bunch of different stuff, bringing in favors. So it's a bit of a scrappy expedition. But they're confident that it will succeed. Okay? But you also think that they're clever. So they're going to make sure it's success. So they're going to send someone along with the PC's group just to make sure they do it right. Okay? Oh, okay. So let's have a look at another house. So this is Dusk Kraken. So this is... excuse me. So these guys here. So Dusk Kraken. These were, I believe, memory serves me right, one of the last countries to be conquered, to be brought into the Empire during its formation. And so this is very, rough Iron Isles type of thing. So these guys are remnant, but imagine a remnant with bits of jewelry and trophies and stuff woven into their plaited body hair and the plaited body fur. Cool. So let's read about these guys. So there's Dusk Kraken. Okay. Family head, Salt Air, Jirai, Dusk Kraken, remnant. Aye, the Dusk Kraken family does not like the city life, nor the rural life, nor any life with masters. With the truce between the Legion barbarians and the Alliance, they like to travel down the River of Knowledge in the hopes of one day regaining control of Port Carthage in the Arcane Bay. If any vanguard be wanting to claim some coastal land, they will find an easy sponsor in the Dusk Kraken family. But be warned, you best not let any of your Tolatal crew do the talking. They ain't too fond of them little buggers. River of Knowledge Ferryman. The wild remnant of the Dusk Kraken Isles have always been an unruly people, and were one of the very last to join the King's Alliance. Over the long history of the Alliance, they were frequently in rebellion against their mainland overlords, and separatist factions would regularly subject the Sea of Fog coastline to brutal pirate raids. In fact, when the Druidic War began, the Dusk Kraken Kingdom was already embroiled in a civil war, and their Salt King, Ulrico Dusk Kraken, was held in captivity by House Veldis. Locked in chains, Ulrico and much of his family were shipped south to Catla, and eventually to Stronghold. Ulrico was the only crowned king to make it to Pole's Rest, despite spending his first years in a dungeon. After his eventual death, due to sickness, while under house arrest, his son Jirai Dusk Kraken assumed control of the house. Jirai is a middle-aged brown-furred remnant, whose imposing and wild figure is amplified by the many charms, trinkets, and trophies woven into his fur. He still owns the ancestral crown of his people, a clean black arcanium circlet with 5 glowing red crystals, known as the Fingers of Corp, arranged along its face. Due to his close royal lineage and having grown up in and defending Stronghold during the war, Jirai was given a position of moderate power within the city by the Regency Council. This appointment is greatly disliked by the Tolatal priests, scholars, and alchemists of Stronghold, as Jirai holds a grudge against them and looks down upon all Tolatal as vermin. Cool. Okay, so these guys settled here, okay? So they're in Stronghold, or at least that's where their house is. They were doing lots of fighting against the Legion barbarians. They're here that were sieging Stronghold during the war, but since that's sort of a bit of a peace happening there, they like to travel down the River of Knowledge, which is this massive river that flows along here, and they control Kraken Tower, which I kind of think of as their real home. Despite them being in Stronghold, this is probably where you're likely to see their seat of power. And they're keen on taking Port Carthage, which is the ruins of a great port trading city that you've got lots of pirates and rebels and stuff like that in there at the moment. So these guys, the other thing, as we read from the unique story, is that they're the only nation whose actual crown king made it to Stronghold. Everyone else was like several tiers down from their crown king, but he was here because he was rebelling against the King's Alliance yet again, doing piracy. But he was captured and put in chains and brought here, and along with his family and his son, who's inherited his crown. And point of interest here, is the crown reference to the fingers of Corp. Corp is the silvery goddess of trade and water. So, these guys being very friendly with the water, very much like Corp. Okay, so I can imagine these guys are probably just edging to, once again, make their own little kingdom, to be independent. You imagine they suck at politics, but are very very capable at a home field advantage with anything to do with water and coastlines. Okay, so I could imagine House Kraken. There's a couple of characters I've got in mind. I could imagine one of them setting out to make their own little place. Okay, they're gonna take Port Carthage. They've hired a bunch of mercenaries. They're gonna make it their own, but because they sort of politically suck a little bit, they've got a bunch of enemies. And I can imagine one of these enemies hiring you, the PCs, to go and spoil the Dusk Kraken's plans to take Carthage. So maybe you're hired as a spy to sort of go along with the Dusk Krakens to take Carthage, but then turn on them at a key point and let somebody else take the city once the Dusk Krakens have taken, once they've done all the hard work of fighting. But this is when maybe the Dusk Krakens, because they're such rebellious people, long lineage of pirates, maybe they've actually allied with the pirates already at Carthage, and there's not really going to be a fight to take the city. They're just going to take it. Okay, cool. So that's just a bit of an idea sprung to mind. Cool. Let's move to the next one. We are going to have a look at Elpis. Okay, so Elpis, got this sort of leaf one. So that's these guys here. So they were really near these guys, which I believe that's Boone. And then you've got the Apollyonos, the wild priests, and then you've got Lagos, which is a sort of a scheming one here. Okay, so let's have a look at these guys. So they've got a kingdom that spans from two big great oceans. Okay, let's read through Elpis. Family head is Count Chimale Elpis Tolatal. Ah, yes, Elpis, the house of golden loyalty. That catchy phrase has meant a lot of things to a lot of different people over the years. In many ways, it has become a self-fulfilling prophecy, a kind of cultural mold that my family finds all too easy to slip into. Lady Kitalik Elpis, daughter of Count Chimale. Has Elpis gained its famous title, the House of Golden Loyalty, after they accepted a large sum of money to join the King's Alliance and open up the northern lands to the armies of Catla. They have always been a merchant family whose kingdom earned its vast wealth through maintaining land trade routes between the western Gale Sea and the southern Sea of Fog. All other trade routes had to traverse multiple kingdoms or go dangerously close to the ill-trusted pirate house of Dusk Kraken. This history, along with the propensity of members of the Elpis family to run banks, gambling dens, prostitution rings, and mercenary gangs, has solidified the reputation of the house as dealers in dark money. But this is also a reputation that some members chafe against, causing them to go out of their way to support charitable causes or perform grand acts of sacrificial heroism. There are two sides to the family coin, is one of Count Chimale Elpis' favourite sayings. Chimale is a cruel and foolish man who was enjoying a 10-year holiday in southern Catlan when the war struck. He was never liked or trusted by the family, who kept him as far away from their business dealings as they could. Chimale has 3 sons and 2 daughters, all of whom wish to see him dead, but none who wish to see their siblings gain control of the house. Count Chimalea became master of the Lockdale, the northernmost city of Pole's Rest, not through merit, but through the political manoeuvrings of other great houses. None in court wanted to see Lockdale in the hands of a rival, and as none saw Elpis as a great threat, they opted to give it to them. Okay, House Elpis. So this is Lockdale up here. This is where they were given here. So House Elpis is, kind of imagine back in the day, they were known as the money house. You know, lots and lots of wealth made from trade, and they got their famous saying. They got their famous saying, it was the house of the golden loyalty. And they sent their no good relative all the way off south just to get him away from the kingdom. And then the war struck. And of course, this no good count ended up in Stronghold, and he ended up inheriting the rulership of the house. Okay, which is just a catastrophe. So this is the house that's kind of got this old reputation of being the money house, but their current reputation is that they're headed by a fool. And then members of the house are even known as like being really dark and shady, or being really charitable and good. So I get the idea that this house, you don't know what the future holds for them. It could go multiple ways. Okay? I think it's only a matter of time before their count ends up dead, assassinated by one of his kids. And then, once the foolish head's gone, someone clever will take over. But this person who takes over, which side of the coin are they going to be? And so if I was introducing NPCs or from this house into a game, I think I'd introduce more than one. Of course, the foolish Count would be a fun character to sort of have in the background, a sort of introduction to the house, to make all the PCs go, oh my goodness, these guys are a bunch of losers. But then maybe meet some 2 others and have them of the both sides of the coin. You know, have one of the PCs just love because they're just so nice and generous and very helpful, you know, in the community, helping out. But then the other one, you know, who like always has a bunch of shady thugs around her, and she runs prostitute rings and gambling dens, and you know, maybe secret pit fights. And so have the PCs sort of, I can imagine them like, okay, well, how are we going to help the good one, who's probably a lot poorer than the other one, and the other ones are probably a lot more clever, but then, you know, I have them sort of that sort of family infighting to determine the future of the house. And I think that fight needs to be settled before they start going out into the wilds and founding new towns. Cool. Okay, so that's them. Let's have a look at Lagos. So Lagos is a very important house in the lore. Okay, so this is House Lagos up here. Okay, this is the house that betrayed the other northern kingdoms during the formation of the King's Alliance, and then gave their rivals, you know, these little strips of land to basically defend their borders against the monsters and the druids in the Whispering Jungle. Okay, so Tolatal House. Let's run over them. Cool. And I believe they have. Let's just read it. Yeah. Okay. Family head is Baroness Ichitaka Lagos, Tolatal. Lady Ichitaka has a brilliant political mind, able to think 3 steps ahead of all, and the cunning and willpower to do what is needed to protect her house. But she overlooks those she perceives as weak, an oversight that will be her downfall. Gadriel Bard. So House Bard is a rival of House Lagos, as we covered in the last vlog. Okay. House Lagos thrived within the political intrigue of the Old King's Alliance. They played the game better than anyone else, and though they had few true friends and many enemies, they were able to maintain the largest kingdom in the Alliance. When the King's Alliance was being formed and most houses were falling to the Catlan army, House Lagos was still scheming. They realized that the oncoming conflict was an opportunity to not only crush their neighbors, but to also build a wall for themselves against the monster-filled Whispering Jungle. Lagos betrayed House Bard and joined the King's Alliance in exchange for their rival being reduced to a small portion of land to the north, a geographical position that the young House Savas would also eventually come to occupy. When the Druidic army marched south, both of these houses were all but destroyed, giving House Lagos an opportunity to flee their homeland. They were among the first to arrive in Stronghold. While other houses accused them of cowardice, they knew they had saved themselves from extinction. Eventually, the other houses followed suit and abandoned their homes to join them. House Lagos continues to hone its political craft, working to manipulate the Regency Council and other great houses to gain advantages for themselves. Baroness Ichitaka knows that House Katla is weakened, and that the once rich rulers of the King's Alliance are quickly emptying their coffers. She is putting herself in position to snatch up House Katla's unique political powers and forming secret alliances for when the Regency Council eventually falls. Duke Katla recognizes this, and so he does everything he can to limit Lagos's power in Stronghold, forcing them back into the political shadows and preoccupying them with maintenance of the rural West Watch. House Lagos has enemies aplenty. House Bard and Savos hold an intensely ancestral grudge against them in a way that only Legion and Kaltorans can, and will do almost anything to see them fall. Baroness Ichitaka protects her family at all costs, and publicly moving against her is a quick way to meet death or political ruin. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so House Lagos is here. That's their House Lagos manor. And they have basically House Catla has maneuvered things to kick them out of Stronghold. Keep them far away. Okay? They've basically said, you've got to go live in the country, and your job is to maintain the West Watch, which is this little bit of watch that's guarding another passage into Pole's Rest up these cliffs. Okay? But House Lagos is buying its time, and you've got this idea of this ruler that's very clever, and I imagine that she would suffer no fools in her children. So her children and her relatives would probably have very good education, they'd be very clever, and the heads of the house would be careful to not let a fool gain too much power, and they wouldn't be opposed to I could imagine them maybe trimming their own vines, so to speak, and that they have a bit of a useless relative, maybe getting rid of them, sending them off to do a job so they get out of the way. And if any one of their house was sort of clever, they would be given lots of power. Okay? So this is a sort of character that comes from this, is sort of the character, the backstabby political character. Okay? Some sort of lord or lady that has a job for the players, but is just gonna backstab. You just know they're gonna backstab them. But they're also the sort of house that would value cleverness or opportunity when it was there. So if the PCs were able to offer House Lagos something, some real sort of opportunity, you could see Lagos really supporting the players really heavily and fully, as long as the players were happy to always to never be on top of Lagos. Like the PCs can be strong, but they got to come underneath Lagos. They're going to support other people and play the games, but they're not going to let everyone get one over them. Okay, let's have a look at the next house. So we're going through a few today. Okay, so this is House Panos. Okay, so this is Panos over here. Okay. And you'll notice that very interestingly, Panos were destroyed during the Druidic War. Okay, so they were reduced down. But nobody quite knows what their current condition is. Okay? So let's read about Panos. Okay. Lady Sarai Panos Kaltorin. Yeah, she's the family head. An old Tadai proverb says, "The size of your heart can be measured by the size of your spirit." This is not intended as literal, but Lady Sarai's spirit, Thornheart, is a massive stag with antlers adorned with roses and thorns. I cannot say for sure that this means Lady Sarai is a good woman, but I can say that I would never wish a confrontation with her spirit. Trador Tadai Shaman. Okay. House Panos originates from a beautiful forested river delta known as the Rosewood, where wildflowers, fruit, and game are plentiful. Like many forests of Acheron, Rosewood has many spirits. To die is not just a way of life here, but a way of being. Some say that the Archdruid left the lands of Panos untouched by the wilding, and that the nation still survives, but none know for sure. As Panos was a secluded kingdom, they had many distinct customs, putting them at odds with the laws of the King's Alliance. In keeping with the teachings of the Tadai, House Panos practices daily meditation, and disputes are settled by trial of spirit, a grueling test of will befitting the crime. These tests are overlooked by syncretic priests who are guided by the spirits of Rosewood and the eternal gods. House Panos has a small presence in Stronghold, as only a few nobles were in the area during the war. The armies of Panos were sent for, but they never made it across the Bloodstone Desert, presumed waylaid by the Drasong clan. Lady Sarai and many of the Panos nobles have long talked about returning to their homelands. It is their belief that their country remains, but they have been unable to secure suitable assistance for the dangerous journey across the Bloodstone Desert, or through the White Expanse. Lady Sarai is the leader of House Panos. She is a hard but good woman, faithful in a Tadai and always attended by her spirit Thornheart. Sarai is well known at court for her bright-coloured and loose-fitting silk robes, the traditional garb of her people. In recent years, House Panos has suffered a great loss. For past grievances, a House Sigmund Shadowblade attempted to murder her family, successfully killing Sarai's husband and her two sons. Thornheart successfully protected the lady and her daughter, Karaj, but by disintegrating the attacker. But her heart is broken, and now more than ever, she wishes to return home. Cool. Okay, so that is an important thing, okay, for these guys, is this little art here is actually showing the assassin that killed the family head and sons, okay? And now you've got the lady. So she was, imagine like there's a few nobles from the house over here. They were just over in the area when the war struck. The armies were called for, but the army failed to cross the dangerous Bloodstone Desert. And now some nobles were stuck in Stronghold. Okay? And their story is of Panos, unlike the other great houses, they're not really, those who are in Pol's Rest aren't really interested in being here in the long term. They don't want to journey out and settle more lands and build new towns for themselves. Especially after the death of her husband, Lady Sarai, she mostly just wants to go home. So I can imagine this is just to discover, is her kingdom still there? Okay? And so this is the sort of thing where the PCs would be hired to act as bodyguards to escort them through the Bloodstone Desert. and discover what is to the east of Pole's Rest. Okay, cool. We are going to push on to the final house that we're going to cover today. This is House Ragnar. Okay, so House Ragnar occupied this tiny little kingdom on these islands out in the middle of the Gale Sea. And one thing that you'll notice is during the Druidic War, the land changes. Okay, so not only got this center area smashed here, but also the lands here have substantially grown. Okay, so you can imagine druids sort of raising up some land and creating these new isles. Sorry, I hit the speaker. Okay, cool. So let's these are a bit of an odd house. Okay, so yeah, let's dive into this. And the first thing that you'll notice from these guys is their family head is Shant Ragnar, a Legion Kaltoran half-blood. Now, keep in mind, half-bloods from two different species, races, are always born sterile, so they can't have kids. Okay? Let's go on. It is hard to find a tale of more woe than that of Ragnar Dragon and Pelaya Veldis. In midst of war, Pelaya found Sir Ragnar maimed. Though they were enemies, Pelaya took pity, tended Ragnar's wounds and softened his heart, until the fetters of love entwined the pair. Alas, this love would doom their houses evermore in bitter rivalry. Extract from the play, The Tragedy of Ragnar and Pelaya. The house of Dragon and Veldis have long been bitter rivals, having gone to war many times over the long history of the King's Alliance. After a particularly brutal skirmish between the two houses, the eldest heir of the Dragon, by the name of Ragnar, was gravely injured in a twist of fate. Pelaya, a princess of Veldis, tended his wounds in secret. The two became lovers and secretly married. This union outraged both houses and was used as a pretext for open war. To escape their house and couple, the couple fled, along with many half-bloods who suffered much persecution during that time, to the Twixt Isles in the Gale Sea, and formed their own kingdom under their own house. Having 6 half-blood children, Ragnar had no way for the house to continue his legacy beyond his immediate offspring. Therefore, Ragnar and Pelaya began a tradition where they would adopt children into the family and establish a system where their successor would be elected by 6 elector counts. The people of the Twixt Isles and House Ragnar were always few in number, but they were prosperous, at least until the Druidic War. The Archdruid unleashed his full wrath upon the Twixt Isles. None know why this small kingdom drew such ire. Some reports said that the islands themselves were consumed by a giant leviathan. More likely, the inhabitants were butchered by sea Nephilim. Either way, House Ragnar is no more. As if history were to repeat itself, a child was born to the houses Dragon and Veldis, but this time the child was not born of love, but by hate. He was given the name Shand, meaning shame, by his mother, and was shunned by his own family. Shand grew in stature and strength, and took on the name Ragnar for himself. The nobles of Stronghold have long thought of unruly Shand in his crusade to aid all half-bloods as a joke. But many half-bloods have joined his house, so much so that the real houses have started to take notice. Okay, so this is House Ragnar. This is a bit of a classic sad story. You know, 2 houses hate each other, but then, you know, 2 of them fell in love. Okay, and of course this didn't go well, and they fled and set up their own little mini kingdom on the Isles of Twixt. Okay, but as an additional burden to this, their children, being half-bloods, are unable to have children themselves, so therefore the family line would die. And so they got a bit creative. Okay, they started, and keep in mind, these guys are way out in the middle of the ocean. Okay, so they're not really gonna get regular visitors from the other big kingdoms, and they're so small they're not really cared about. But anyway, so they set up their own laws and customs where they get to elect their ruler, and they create a bit of a haven for half-bloods, which are often outcasts, especially from noble families. And anyway, the archdruid took a hating for them, killed the whole house. So the house died, but then another half-blood between those two rival great houses, that's these two houses here, once again came about, but this time not of love. It's a bit nasty, okay? And this guy is just, he's born, he's raised, but he's an outcast. He's hated by his own mother. He's called Shame, okay? They just named him Shame. And he basically brings it on personal crusade. I'm going to reinvigorate this house once again. I'm going to fight for the rights of half-bloods, okay? So you can imagine just really passion, okay? Just passion. And so I can imagine someone from this house is either like a half-blood who is an outcast from somewhere, and he is going to join this house, okay? And he's just very passionate and angry. So you can imagine a very, very angry character. The sort of one that would hate the other great houses, rulers, hate the nobility, hates the established power structure because they've done so much wrong by them. Yeah, I think that would be a fun house from House Ragnar. Okay, so next week we're gonna cover the last ones, but hopefully this kind of got your creative juices going. I'm really quite proud of all these great houses. If you do pick up the Arcane Bane book, you can read through these in more details, and there's other bits of history you can see they tie into the different gods and the different religions. You know, you've got the eternal priesthood, and then the Tardai, which we sort of lightly touched on today. Cool. Okay. Take care, guys. I hope you have a great day. Bye.